My dad kicked me out for being pregnant. Now he wants in after meeting the dad. After he kicked me out, I didn't hear from him for almost 2 years. Not a call, not a text, nothing. I was 20, working double shifts at a diner while my mom secretly slipped me grocery money behind his back because she was too scared to stand up to him outright. I named my son Eli. My dad never even asked what I named him. I need to back up for a second because I don't think people understand what kicked out actually looked like in my house. It wasn't a movie scene with slammed doors and dramatic music. It was quiet. My dad sat me down at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd helped me with algebra homework in 9th grade, and he slid a manila envelope across it. Inside was $300 in 20s and a printed list of women's shelters in the area. He typed it up. He'd taken the time to type it up. That's the part that still gets me, even now. Not the anger, the planning. He said, "You have until Sunday." It was Wednesday. My mom stood in the doorway the entire time, arms crossed over her chest, not saying a single word. I used to be so angry at her for that silence. It took me years to understand that her silence was the loudest thing in that kitchen. She was terrified of him too, just in a different way than I was. So Sunday came, and I packed 2 duffel bags and a laundry basket, and I moved in with my friend Marisol, who had a pull-out couch and a roommate who smoked too much inside. I was 19 weeks pregnant and throwing up more than I ever had in the first trimester, probably from stress, and I got a job at a diner off Route 9 because they didn't ask too many questions, and the manager, an older woman named Deb, took one look at my belly and said, "Honey, we'll figure out your schedule around doctor's appointments, don't you worry." Deb became more of a parent to me in 6 months than my father had been in the last 6 years, and I mean that with my whole chest. My mom would show up sometimes at the diner during her lunch break, always alone, always glancing over her shoulder like she was doing something illegal. She'd order a coffee she never drank and slide an envelope of cash across the table. Same move my dad had made with the shelter list, except this one wasn't kicking me out. It was trying to keep me alive. "Don't tell your father," she'd whisper every single time, like it was new information, like I hadn't already figured that part out on my own. I want to tell you about the couch at Marisol's place too, because it matters more than it should. It had this one broken spring on the left side that dug into my hip no matter how I positioned myself, and some nights I'd lie there at 3 in the morning, hand on my stomach, feeling my son shift around inside me and just talk to him out loud in the dark. I'd tell him things like, "I don't know what I'm doing, but I promise I'm not going anywhere," because that felt like the one promise I actually had control over. Marisol's roommate Priya worked nights at a call center, and some mornings she'd come home and find me crying quietly on that couch and never once made me explain myself, just made me toast with too much butter and sat with me until I could breathe normal again. People like that don't get enough credit in stories like mine, the friend's roommate who owes you nothing and gives you everything anyway. I also had this ritual where every Friday, on my one night off, I'd walk to the little library 2 blocks from the diner and just sit in the parenting section reading baby books I couldn't afford to buy, taking pictures of pages on my phone so I could reread them later. I read about swaddling and colic and sleep regressions while sitting cross-legged on a library carpet built for toddlers, 8 months pregnant, completely alone, and I remember thinking, this is the loneliest kind of preparation there is, getting ready to raise a person with nobody getting ready beside you. I didn't know yet that Daniel was 2 months away from walking into that diner and changing all of it. If you'd told me then, I don't think I would have believed you. Some nights, hope felt like a luxury I couldn't afford, right up there with a working car heater and dental insurance. I met Daniel, my husband now, my boyfriend then, at that diner. He came in every Tuesday and Thursday with his co-workers from the hardware store 2 blocks down, always ordered the same thing, a Denver omelet and black coffee, always left too big of a tip like he was trying to prove something to himself. He asked me out the first time when I was visibly, obviously pregnant, 7 months along, ankles swollen like water balloons, hair in a greasy bun because I hadn't had the energy to shower that morning. He didn't care. He said, and I remember this word for word because nobody had said anything like it to me in months, "I think you're one of the strongest people I've ever met, and I'd like to take you to dinner if you'll let me." I cried in the walk-in freezer for 10 minutes after that. Deb found me and just handed me a napkin and said, "Let him in, kid. Let somebody in for once." Our first date was nothing fancy, just a burger place with plastic booths, because I told him up front I couldn't do anything expensive and I wasn't going to pretend otherwise. He showed up with a small stuffed elephant for the baby before we'd even ordered food, set it on the table between us and said, "I know it's early, I just saw it and thought of you guys." He said, "You guys," like it was already a package deal, like the baby wasn't a complication to be managed, but just a person he was excited to eventually meet. I remember staring at that elephant for way too long, turning it over in my hands, because nobody outside my mom had acknowledged my son as a real wanted person yet, not once. And here was this guy I'd known for 2 weeks, doing it without even trying. Things moved fast after that, faster than either of us expected. But when you're building a life out of the wreckage of another one, sometimes fast is just what surviving looks like. Within a month, I'd met Frank and Daniel's mother, Carol, at a Sunday dinner I was terrified to attend. I sat at their table bracing for judgment that never came. Carol just piled a second helping of pot roast on my plate without asking and said, "You're eating for 2, sweetheart, sit still and let me take care of you." And I had to excuse myself to the bathroom because I didn't know what to do with kindness that wasn't conditional on anything. Daniel's family is not what people picture when they hear old money, even though technically I guess they are. His grandfather built a construction business from nothing, and by the time Daniel came around, there were buildings downtown with the family name on the cornerstones. But Daniel himself worked at a hardware store making $16 an hour because his dad believed you had to earn your place, not just inherit it. His dad, Frank, is the single greatest man I have ever met, and I will fight anyone who says otherwise. Frank came to my next ultrasound, not because Daniel asked him to, because Daniel mentioned offhand at Sunday dinner that I was going alone, and Frank just showed up at the clinic the next week, sat in the waiting room in his work boots, and when the tech asked if Dad wanted to come back, Frank stood up before I could even explain the situation and said, "I'm not the dad, I'm just here so she's not by herself." He held my hand during that ultrasound. A near stranger held my hand while my own father was 40 minutes away, typing up shelter pamphlets for other people's daughters. Probably, since he sure wasn't using them for me. Eli was born on a Tuesday in March, 3 weeks early, during an ice storm so bad that Daniel had to drive 45 minutes an hour to get us to the hospital safely. Frank showed up anyway, ice storm and all, sat in the waiting room for 11 hours drinking vending machine coffee, and when they finally let people in to meet the baby, he cried before I did. A grown man in flannel sobbing over a baby that wasn't even his blood, while my own parents didn't know their grandson had been born until my cousin let it slip 3 weeks later at a family barbecue my mom didn't even tell me was happening. I remember the exact moment they placed Eli on my chest, this warm, furious, 7-pound stranger who I somehow already loved more than my own life. And the first face I saw over Daniel's shoulder wasn't my mother's or my father's, it was Frank's, wiping his eyes with the back of his flannel sleeve, whispering, "Well, would you look at that?" Like Eli was the most impressive thing he'd ever laid eyes on. Carol brought a hospital bag she'd packed weeks in advance with tiny newborn outfits she'd washed herself in baby detergent because, she told me later, "I figured somebody should be ready, since you were doing it all on your own otherwise." I didn't cry from the pain of labor. I cried from that, from being prepared for, finally, by people who owed me nothing. Nobody from my side of the family sent so much as a card. I want to be really honest with you here, because I think this is the part people skip over when they tell stories like this. I didn't spend those 2 years being strong and moving on and living my best life like some inspirational Instagram caption. I spent a lot of nights sobbing into Daniel's shoulder, wondering what was so wrong with me that my own father couldn't love me through a mistake, because that's what he called it. A mistake, not a grandchild. A mistake I'd made that he refused to be associated with. There were nights I typed out texts to him and never sent them. Nights I drove past my childhood house just to see if the porch light was still the same color. Once, I sat in my car outside for almost an hour, watching my dad mow the lawn like nothing in his life had changed, like he hadn't erased an entire person from it, and I never even got out of the car. I just watched him for a while, and then I drove home and threw up in my own driveway. So when I say I hadn't heard from him in almost 2 years, I need you to understand that it wasn't peaceful, it wasn't closure, it was just silence with a heartbeat, and I carried it everywhere. The next time I saw my father was at my grandmother's funeral. I almost didn't go, honestly, but she was the only one who never stopped calling me, so I owed her that. My grandmother, my dad's own mother, used to call me every single Sunday for 2 years, without fail, and never once told my father she was doing it. She'd ask about Eli, ask to see pictures, and every single call ended the same way, with her saying, "Give him time, sweetheart. He's stubborn like his father was." I never fully understood what she meant by that until much, much later. I walked into that funeral home holding my husband's hand, well, boyfriend at the time, now husband, and my dad's face did this thing where it just froze, like he was doing math in his head. My husband's family isn't rich exactly, but his last name is on 3 buildings downtown, and I watched my father clock that within about 4 seconds. I watched 2 full years of silence evaporate off his face and get replaced with something that looked a lot like calculation. He didn't say a word to me the whole service, didn't look at Eli once, even though Eli, not even 2 years old yet, kept pointing at the framed photo of his great-grandmother and babbling, "Nana, Nana," because that's what we taught him to call her from pictures. My mom cried the entire time and kept glancing at my dad like she was waiting for permission to come sit with me. She never got it. She sat 2 rows behind us the whole service. Afterward, in the parking lot, while I was buckling my son into his car seat, I heard footsteps behind me. It was my dad, hands in his pockets, doing this awkward little smile he used to do when he wanted something from my mom. I hadn't seen that smile directed at me in years, and honestly, some small, humiliating part of me lit up when I saw it. That's the part nobody tells you about estrangement. Even after everything, some little kid part of you still wants your dad to want you. He said, "He's a good-looking kid," talking about my son. 5 words after 2 years. I didn't say anything. I just kept buckling the car seat, my hands shaking so bad I fumbled the clasp twice. Then he asked my husband, completely out of nowhere, if he had a few minutes to talk business sometime. Not congratulations, not "I'm sorry," business. My husband, to his credit, just said, "Sure," real polite, and got in the car. And the second we pulled out of that parking lot, he looked at me and went, "Did that actually just happen?" I laughed. It was that kind of laugh where if you don't laugh, you're going to fall apart in the passenger seat of your own car. So I laughed until it turned into crying, and Daniel just just held my hand over the console the rest of the drive and didn't say anything because there wasn't really anything to say. It got worse. 2 weeks later, my dad texted me, first text in 2 years, asking for my husband's email for something exciting. I didn't respond. He texted again saying he wanted to be part of Eli's life and maybe we could all get lunch. I still didn't respond. So he called my husband directly, cornered him at his own office lobby, no less, asking about investment opportunities in some strip mall renovation deal, dropping my name and Eli's name like we were the reason he deserved a seat at the table. My husband never even told me at first. He said he didn't want to upset me, which, in hindsight, tells you everything about how bad it already was. I found out because my dad texted me a third time asking why my husband went cold on him. I sat in my car in the school pickup line and cried, not because I was sad, but because for 2 years I imagined what it would look like if he ever wanted back in, and I always pictured an apology. I never once pictured a pitch deck. Here's where it gets messier, and I promise I'm not adding this for drama. This is just what happened. I called my mom because I needed to understand what was going on, and my mom, for the first time in my entire life, actually told me the truth. My dad's construction supply company had been bleeding money for almost a year. Bad investments, a lawsuit from a subcontractor, a business partner who'd quietly pulled out and taken half their capital with him. My dad was drowning, and somewhere in his drowning, he'd found out through a mutual acquaintance from church that Frank, my father-in-law, might be interested in backing new development projects downtown. My mom said it so plainly, like she'd been holding it in for months and finally had permission to let it out. "He's not coming back for Eli," she said. "He's coming back for Frank's checkbook, and he's using you and the baby to get in the door." Then she started crying on the phone, apologizing over and over, saying she should have told me sooner, saying she was scared of what would happen at home if he found out she'd said anything. I need you to sit with that for a second the way I had to sit with it. My father didn't reappear because he missed me. He didn't reappear because he'd had some long, tearful reckoning about the daughter he threw away. He reappeared because he did the math on my husband's last name and decided I was worth reopening a door for, purely because of what was standing on the other side of it. I wrote him one text after that phone call with my mom. I told him Eli has a grandpa already, my husband's dad, who showed up to every ultrasound appointment I had because my own father wouldn't. I told him the door he slammed shut doesn't reopen because he finally found a reason to walk through it. I told him I hoped his business worked out, genuinely, because I didn't want to be the kind of person who wished harm on someone, even him. And then I blocked his number. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 3 weeks later, he showed up at my house. Not called first, not texted, just showed up on a Saturday morning while Eli was in the front yard in his little rain boots stomping in puddles from the night before. I saw my dad's car pull up and my whole body went cold in a way I didn't know was physically possible. I ran outside before he could even get to the porch, scooped Eli up mid-puddle stomp, and stood there holding my son like a shield, which, looking back, is exactly what he was in that moment. My dad got out of the car looking older than I remembered, thinner, with these deep lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. For one horrible, traitorous second, I almost softened, and then he opened his mouth. "I was hoping we could talk," he said. "Maybe you could put in a good word with your father-in-law. I've got a proposal, really strong numbers. I just need someone to open the door." I stood there in my driveway holding my 2-year-old son, and I said the only thing I had left in me. I said, "You had a door, Dad. It was me. You slammed it. I'm not opening another one for you just because you finally found something on the other side worth walking through." He tried to argue. He said I was being dramatic, that businesses need connections, that this was how the world worked, that he was still my father whether I liked it or not. And I said, calm as I've ever been in my life, "You stopped being my father the day you handed me a list of shelters instead of a hug. Frank has held my son more times in 2 years than you've held me in 20. Get back in your car." He left. He didn't yell, didn't slam anything, just got quiet in that same terrifying way he'd been quiet at the kitchen table all those years ago, got in his car, and drove off. My mom called me crying that night, said he came home and didn't speak to anyone for 3 hours, just sat in the garage with the door open. 2 months after that, my mom left him. Actually left him, filed the papers herself, moved into a little apartment near my grandmother's old church. She told me later that watching him try to use me and Eli as a business connection was the final straw in a marriage that had been running on fumes for a decade. She said, "I stayed for so long because I thought loyalty meant something to him. Turns out the only thing that ever meant something to him was leverage." My mom sees Eli every single week now. She braids nothing because his hair's too short, but she reads him the same books she used to read me. And last month she cried in my kitchen and told me she was sorry it took losing everything to finally choose her own daughter. I told her it wasn't too late. I meant it. As for my dad, the strip mall deal fell through anyway, with or without Frank's money. I heard through my cousin the family grapevine still runs strong even now. He texted me one more time, months later. No business talk this time, just 3 words. "I miss you." I stared at that text for a long time. I didn't answer it. Not out of spite, not really. I just didn't have an answer that felt honest yet. Maybe I never will. Maybe someday I will. I genuinely don't know, and I've stopped pretending I have to know right now. Eli is about to turn 4. He calls Frank Pop Pop and doesn't know he's not blood because in every way that's ever mattered, he is. He asks sometimes why he doesn't have another grandpa like his friend Mason does, and I tell him some people take longer to become the kind of grandpa a kid deserves, and some people never do. And either way, he is so completely loved that it doesn't leave a hole. I don't know if that's the right thing to tell a 4-year-old. It's the truest thing I've got. Some days I still catch myself hoping my dad will show up just to see Eli. No strings attached, no proposal in his back pocket, no strip mall, no favor to ask. He never has. Funny how easy it was for him to disown his own daughter over one phone call's worth of disappointment, and how hard it's apparently been for him to give up on a business deal that's already dead. I used to think love was supposed to be the strongest thing in a person. I've learned the hard way that for some people it just isn't, and the sooner you stop waiting for it to be, the sooner you can go build a family out of the people who actually showed up. Frank walked me down the aisle at my wedding, by the way. Daniel asked him to, and Frank cried so hard the officiant had to pause the ceremony for a second. He wore my grandmother's handkerchief in his jacket pocket, the same one she used to wave at me from her porch every Sunday I visited, because when I mentioned it to Carol offhand, she'd tracked it down through my mom without telling me, just so a piece of the family that actually loved me could be there, even in her absence. My real dad wasn't invited. My mom was, by then already separated from him, and she sat in the front row next to Carol, the two of them sharing a box of tissues like old friends. And at one point during the vows, I looked out and saw my mother laughing at something Carol whispered to her, an easy, unguarded laugh I hadn't seen on her face since I was a little kid, and I understood in that moment that leaving my father hadn't just freed me, it had started to free her too. I don't regret not inviting him. I regret a lot of things about those years, the shame, the loneliness, the nights I cried into diner napkins on my break, the ultrasounds I sat through alone before Frank ever showed up, the birthdays where I lied to Eli and said Grandpa was just busy because 4-year-olds don't need the whole ugly truth yet. But I have never once regretted closing that door for good, even when he came back knocking, even when some scared, hopeful part of me still wanted to let him in, because I've learned that hope, when it's aimed at the wrong person, isn't optimism. It's just a slower kind of hurting yourself. Last week, Eli asked me, completely out of nowhere while we were coloring at the kitchen table, "Mommy, do I have another grandpa somewhere?" And I set my crayon down and thought about lying, thought about softening it the way I always do, and instead I just said, "You do, buddy. He made some choices that meant he couldn't be part of our family, but that's not your fault, and it's not because of anything about you. You are the most loved kid I know." He nodded, like that made perfect sense, the way kids just accept things adults spend years unpacking in therapy, and went right back to coloring a dinosaur purple. I sat there for a second longer than I needed to, just watching him, this whole entire person who exists because I refused to disappear when my father wanted me to. Some family you're born into. Some family you build out of the people who show up in the ice storm, who hold your hand during an ultrasound when they don't have to, who pack a hospital bag for a grandchild that isn't theirs by blood, who let you cry in a walk-in freezer and hand you a napkin without asking why. I spent so long grieving the family I was born into that I almost missed the one that was quietly building itself around me the whole time. I know which one actually counts. I hope, if you're reading this and you're in the middle of your own version of that kitchen table conversation, that you find yours too. It's out there. Sometimes it looks nothing like what you expected, and it's better for it.